Hello, everyone, and welcome on in. This is the Blue Ski Mask Show, and Kurt, this is the first show that we're doing with no Lions game to talk about.
No Lions game. It sucks, but at least we can say we made it pretty far, at least farther than I anticipated. But that doesn't mean there isn't any Lions stuff to talk about, because as we talked about last week, Ben Johnson is staying as the offensive coordinator for the Lions, but there was some drama this past week between Ben Johnson and the Washington Commanders. And it's pretty funny. Of course, Ben Johnson met with the Commanders to take over, I think, either as the head coach or maybe to jump ship and be the offensive coordinator there. And things didn't go well. Ben Johnson called the new Commanders ownership, which is a bunch of different guys. I think Magic Johnson is a part of them as well. He called them basketball guys and said they were too confident in their football opinions.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I tell you what, I did think that was a weird move because I heard he called them like while they were on the plane from Washington to Detroit. And, you know, here he is about to be interviewed for, I think it was the head coaching job. And all of a sudden he just calls him. He's like, hey, I'm like removing myself from being a candidate. And I think they were flying to Detroit to interview both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So at that point, it was just a weird situation, but I was pretty surprised to hear he was coming back. I know last year he got a look for a head coaching job, and Lions fans were really happy when he came back last year. And I think a lot of fans and observers of the Lions thought this was undoubtedly going to be his last year in Detroit.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you know, and one thing I did hear is that he said he thought the Lions had unfinished business. Like that loss in the NFC Championship game stung that bad that he wanted to come back and run it back with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and the guys. So very interesting. I will say that. That's interesting. But like you have written here that Commanders claimed that Ben Johnson didn't interview well, which I think that's a little hard to believe.
Yeah, I think that's just a little copium from the Commanders. I think they were just a little disappointed that Ben Johnson isn't going to be on their team next year, especially under the new ownership. But I don't know. I've always viewed the Commanders, like that entire franchise as a whole, as just a dumpster fire of a franchise. So
yep.
They don't deserve Ben Johnson. We deserve him more. Even though you can't say much about our franchise as a whole either. So
yeah, ever since they changed from the Redskins to the Commanders, I think things have gone downhill. And even in their later years as the Redskins, they were not great, but for sure. Moving on, we have Eminem. Let's talk a little bit about him. He was in the news because he was at the game last week, and good for him being there at least. Everyone knows Eminem's a big Lions fan. He's been with the team through the real bad years, but I think his recent actions have kind of been a little cringy.
They have been, for sure. I remember seeing stuff at halftime when the Lions were up, like just comments among like all social media. We're going to get an Eminem versus Taylor Swift Super Bowl. And it's just a little weird. But after it was confirmed Ben Johnson was returning, Eminem tweeted out, and I'll quote this: Guess I should stop recording the diss track. LOL at Ben Johnson. Thank you for staying. We can't break this team up, especially since I'm on it. Coach Campbell, we love you too, bro. Let's run it back next year. I'm ready. I promise you I will get us to the Super Bowl.
I don't know what he thinks he's going to do to help that happen.
Even if it's a purely like satirical comment, it's still just, bro, stop. We get it. He thinks he's a part of the team.
He can show up to every game, home and away, and cheer as loud as he wants, and it's not going to change anything. It's not going to change the fact that Josh Reynolds drops 2 balls. It's not going to change the fact that Jahmyr Gibbs fumbled. It doesn't change anything. And then you see that picture, I'm sure you saw it in San Francisco, of him flipping off the 49ers fans when the Lions were up by 17 or something and we all know how that turned out. But I just
Yeah.
thought that was real cringy. Like, dude, if you want to do that at the end of the game in the opposing team stadium, be my guest. You won the game. You're going to the first Super Bowl in franchise history. But
Right.
at halftime or just before halftime, whenever the picture was taken, I don't know, man. That's a bad look.
And there's like, we have like some of the cringiest celebrity fans. I think Ninja is a Lions fan.
Yep.
He's a Fortnite streamer. And Taylor Lautner, who we best know as Shark Boy. And I think Jacob in, what is it called? That one movie where it's like the vampires and the wolves.
Oh, I don't know what you're talking
Twilight.
about. Twilight?
So we have Shark Boy, we have a Fortnite guy, and Eminem as our lead celebrity fans. Little rough. But in other news, the Pro Bowl happened. In case any of you forgot, because I sure did. And Amon-Ra St. Brown caught 10 passes for 117 yards and a touchdown. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think, caught a touchdown pass. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's just because the Pro Bowl, nobody cares. So that's all the info I could find, because I didn't watch the Pro Bowl at all.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest. I didn't watch it either. Do you know if those 10 passes for 117 yards and a touchdown for St. Brown, was that like, that wasn't in a real game because they don't play the real game anymore. That was just like,
I think it's just like flag football
okay,
now
flag
in
football.
a way.
Okay.
I don't know.
I only saw a few clips of the Pro Bowl, and one clip I saw was of Tyreek Hill catching the ball and running, but the field was like really shrunk down. Like it was like a 40 or 50 yard field or something. It was weird. And then I saw some other videos of, Aiden Hutchinson and Penei Sewell. I think they were pushing the cart or whatever. And
Jason Kelsey was on it, I think, or something. I don't know.
It's interesting. I do give them credit. They realized that the game, only led to injuries and not a whole lot of people were really caring anymore. And they're trying to make it a little more interesting. At least I do give them some credit, but I still don't think very many people watch.
One thing that also sucks is that it's not in Hawaii anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is, whenever I thought about the Pro Bowl, like growing up, I'm like, oh, everyone's going to Hawaii.
Yep.
But I think they were in Florida. So definitely a little weird change of scenery it's been for the Pro Bowl as a whole.
Yeah. If I'm being honest, I watched more of the NHL All-Star Weekend than I did the NFL. I watched some good hockey skills competition. Connor McDavid won that. It was entertaining to watch. Hopefully the NFL can get back to that. Let's move into a little bit of the off season, because that's what the Lions are in now, and they need to start focusing on next year's team. Kurt, I feel like you're a big salary cap guy. Why don't you lay out the Lions situation and what options they may have?
So this summer, the Lions will have a projected cap space of $61 million, according to SportTac, which is really, really reliable on a lot of salary stuff, not only with teams and players. And if all their projections remain true, we will have the seventh most cap space to spend among NFL teams. And there's only one other playoff team, the Houston Texans, that rank ahead of us in projected cap space. So, pretty good news for us.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is very interesting. A lot of options. We know that Brad Holmes is good in the draft. If anything is a given, it's that Brad Holmes is going to do his due diligence and have a really good draft. But knowing that you have the seventh most cap space in the league after just making it a few plays away from the Super Bowl, I feel like that you're in a really, really good spot. But there are a lot of players on this list that are slated to become free agents.
Right. We have a lot of guys that will be free agents, and the list I have in our notes isn't even the full list. But you have to imagine that between the draft and who's going to be free agents at least who were on our team last year, I don't think we're going to bring a lot of these guys back. CJ Gardner-Johnson probably headlines that list. And I mean, he he played in maybe like 3 or 4 games, I think, the entire season. Of course, he was out with injury most of the year. And I don't know if he's a guy that we look to bring back next season. And of course, Jonah Jackson, Graham Glasgow, 2 important pieces on the line. I honestly think that's a problem we'll solve in the draft, but we'll see what happens with that. With
guard you're talking about?
Yeah,
okay.
I think because we can talk about the draft a little later, but I think if any position on offense is covered in the draft, I think it's going to be a spot on the O-line, of course. And Josh Reynolds, too. We've been talking about him the past couple of weeks, how he's showed up in a lot of games where he needed to, with Sam Laporta out for injury, but of course he had that bad drop in the NFC Championship. So I'm curious to see what we do with him for sure as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know a lot of Lions fans maybe are getting a little tired of C.J. Gardner-Johnson and his antics.
I never will be.
You never will be?
No.
You like it?
No. I gravitate towards trash talkers, especially when they're on our team.
Okay.
So
I will say I don't really have too much of a preference either way, because I do enjoy the occasional bit of trash talk, but I think last week, if I remember right, he was waving like goodbye to the San Francisco fans early in the second quarter.
Way too early.
I'm like, dude, I said it while I was watching it live. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? It's early in the second quarter, and sure enough, they blew it. But yeah, that's going to be, I think, the most interesting, free agency move this team makes this offseason, aside from, players that they may go out and get. But I think he's the one, like you said, he headlines that list of most intriguing in terms of coming back or not. And then there are some notable free agents around the rest of the league that the Lions could look to sign. Some big names on here, but some other ones that, could just be role players.
Right. And like, just looking at how this free agency class looks, it looks to be, to me at least, mainly defensive players, which I think is perfect for what we need to do to improve this team. Chris Jones is going to be a free agent. That would be awesome if we got Chris Jones.
Yeah, he's a player from Kansas City for sure. Another name pops out to me is Antoine Winfield. I know he's pretty good. Is he getting old? I feel like he's been around for a while now.
I feel like you're right on that for sure.
I will look it up really quick, but he's a guy that intrigues me for sure.
Especially if C.J. Gardner-Johnson is someone we don't bring back. Maybe that's a guy we can bring in to sort of cover what we're losing with Gardner-Johnson.
Yeah, he's only 25 years old.
Wow.
So I was wrong. He must be just coming off of his rookie contract then, if he's that young. But you also got Mike Evans and T. Higgins. I don't know if wide receiver is going to be the team's biggest need.
I don't think so either, but I still think it's a possibility that we get. I don't think, like, free agency as a whole for the Lions, I don't think will be a big splash in terms of names we get, but I mean, come on, Amon-Ra St. Brown, T. Higgins, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta.
Yeah, man.
And the best running back duo in the league. I don't think T. Higgins will sign with us, but it would be pretty fun to watch that team.
It would be. And you have to imagine, though, he's going to want to get paid.
Yeah.
And
oh, yeah.
Like you mentioned, the Lions are in a pretty good spot cap-wise, but that's a situation that could be trouble. I think you might be better off going to the draft, drafting a young wide receiver, get him on a rookie deal, and see if he works out. All right, Kurt, let's nerd out a little bit over the NFL draft. The Lions have 7 picks, 1 in each round, except for the 4th, and they have 2 in the 3rd. So they have picks in the 1st, 2nd, 5th, 6th, and 7th, and then 2 in the 3rd, none in the 4th. Obviously, a lot of the focus is going to be on that first round pick. The Lions are picking 29th after losing to the 49ers.
Which isn't that weird to say? The Lions are picking 29th.
It is weird.
I don't think I've ever... Well, obviously not. We've never seen a Lions pick this late in our lives.
Yeah, unless it was a trade or something, but I can't recall any of that off the top of my head. But 29, I think most people would agree you're looking at a cornerback or you're looking at an edge rusher.
For sure.
I think those are the two options. I mean, those are your two weaknesses. Cam Sutton continually got burned late in the season and in the playoffs, and edge, you really don't have anyone on the other side of the line opposite Aiden Hutchinson. And right. I think if you got a solid pass rusher that can get to the quarterback, you can't double either guy. And with the win rate from Hutchinson or whoever you may draft, you're getting to the quarterback probably more times than you're not. So very interested to see what the Lions will do. You said you have a preference.
I do have a preference. I would really, 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 really love the Lions to draft Chop Robinson from Penn State, which might be tough hearing as a Michigan guy. But just based upon picking at 29, I think that's probably the most realistic hope that we can have. And I remember last year, I really, really wanted us to draft Jalen Carter, and we didn't. And I should stop saying really. But I think we need to solve issues on the D-line, because when you think of a defense, it's a whole unit. If your D-line's elite, that'll make up for the mistakes your corners make, because you're getting to the QB faster and you're pressuring them, like you said, more often than not. So I think we should round out the D-line and take Chop Robinson. Of course, if available.
Right. I wouldn't be upset with that. I'm not going to lie. I do think you have to go either corner or edge with that first spot. In my opinion, if I was Brad Holmes, I would go corner, just because I feel like that's your biggest need. And depending on what happens with James Houston, we didn't talk about him, but he's going to be a free agent this upcoming offseason as well. Depending on what happens with him, he's serviceable enough, I think, to the point where you can get away with drafting a pass rusher in the second round or the third round. And like I said, Cam Sutton was just a total liability out on the field, basically at all times these past playoffs. And even Kindle Vildor was out there. He was the guy that had the interception that should have been hit right off his face mask and into the hands of Brandon Ayuk. But I'm looking at a mock draft right here that has the Lions taking cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry out of Alabama at 29. I watched him play in the Rose Bowl. That dude's pretty good. Listen, I don't sit down and watch film on all these guys, or hardly any of them, to be honest. But Kool-Aid McKinstry's a player. He's a guy. I talked to him just before the game at media days. He's a baller, and I'd be very happy with the Lions taking him at 29. I also see here in the same mock draft the Baltimore Ravens at 30 taking another corner, Ennis Rakestraw Jr. out of Missouri. I haven't watched any film. I can't lie, but those are two guys there at the end of the first round that I'm drooling over if I'm Brad Holmes. I need a corner to anchor that defense, and I think one of those two guys would be great.
I agree with you. I'm just very, very I'm skeptical if Kool-Aid McKinstry does fall to us at 29. I do really like Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo. He's a cornerback. You know, you might be skeptic because, of course, it's Toledo, right? He didn't go to Alabama. He didn't go to a Big Ten school. But I would be happy with a corner at 29, of course. But we're not going to get a shot at the big names like Terrion Arnold and I think Cooper DeJean as well from Iowa. Yeah. Which is interesting, of course, with him.
He's white. That's what's interesting to me. He's going to be the first white cornerback in decades, I think, in the NFL. But yeah, I think you're right. You're not going to hit unless you trade up, which
isn't out of the realm of possibilities.
You're not going to put it past Brad Holmes to trade up, but You're likely not going to get one of those big name guys, Terrion Arnold, Cooper DeJean. But in this mock draft that I'm looking at, which is on behindthesteelcurtain.com, I don't know what this website is, but I found it here. The end of the first round is loaded with corners and defensive linemen. At 22, the Eagles take Nate Wiggins, corner out of Clemson. 23, I'm just going to run through these really quick. The Houston Texans take Latu Latu, defensive lineman out of UCLA. 24, the Dallas Cowboys take your guy, Quinyon Mitchell. And like you said, there's probably a little bit of skepticism being from Toledo, a MAC school. It's not Alabama. You're not playing the best teams in college football every week. So it is something where you're going to have to sit down and watch a lot of film, have a meeting with Mitchell and other guys to make sure that, you know, he's got his head screwed on straight and everything like that. At 26, the Buccaneers take Darius Robinson, an edge rusher out of Missouri, another Missouri guy. And then 27, the Cardinals take Byron Murphy II, another defensive lineman. And that's when you get into the Lions taking McKinstry and the Ravens taking Rakestraw. But a lot of good options. It's interesting to me that there's a lot of corners and edge rushers going, because if the Lions see someone that they like a lot better than maybe some of the other prospects, like we just said, I wouldn't put it past Brad Holmes to trade up for the guy they really want. We saw it last year with Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Or no, I'm sorry.
Well, we traded back.
They traded back
for Jahmyr Gibbs.
And then took Jahmyr Gibbs. But I guess it's a little bit different of a situation.
I will say this, though. If we take any offense that's not the offensive line in the first 3 rounds, I wouldn't be too happy.
Yeah, that'd be pretty dumb.
It would be pretty dumb. And I'm scared it'll happen, because you never know what Brad Holmes is cooking. You just never do. If you told me we'd have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery on this team a year ago at this time, I would laugh in your face. But look what happened. Yeah. So nothing is out of the realm of possibility for Brad Holmes and the Detroit Lions.
What's interesting is that round 1, they obviously picked 29th overall. Round 2, though, they don't pick again until 61. That's a pretty big drop off. You're looking at 32 picks between your first and second round pick. I wonder, I don't have a 2-round mock draft in front of me right now, but I wonder what kind of edge rushers or corners you're going to get at 61 compared to, obviously the guys in the first round will be better, but I wonder how big of a drop off there is and how many corners and edge rushers are getting picked between those 2 picks, rather than, like I said, there was a big run of edge rushers and corners in the mock draft that I was looking at before the 29th pick. But then the first third round pick, that is the one that the Lions have from Minnesota, is just 12 picks after the second round pick. They pick 61st overall and then 73rd overall. So you're going to get a quick transition there. And then you pick again, 19 picks later, again in the third round at 92nd overall. And then you got a long break, round 5, 162nd, round 6, 206, and then round 7, 246. So, in a perfect world with no trades or anything like that, the Lions are going to add 7 guys to their team. And I think you can almost guarantee that 2 of them are going to be, at least 2, are going to be a corner and an edge rusher. Probably a receiver, like you mentioned, they might need to get, because Amon-Ra St. Brown kind of carried. Sam Laporta was there too. And, you know, you saw what happened in the NFC Championship game with Josh Reynolds. So if I had to bet corner, edge, wide receiver, those are 3 that you can book it for at least 7 picks.
And hopefully an outside linebacker that can defend the pass, because we need a variety there as well. Hopefully, at least if we want to build a more rounded out defense. Obviously, we had one of the better run defenses this year, but we kept getting burned on pass plays. And like I said earlier, the defense is one unit. You can have the 2 best corners in the league, but if your front 7 is built to defend the run, that's what you're going to do, is defend the run.
Yeah.
So,
Let's speed through these NFL honors picks really quick. I believe that's happening soon. I thought
it's like a couple days before the Super Bowl, I think.
So this week.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's run through this really quick. MVP. Let's make a prediction. I think we both agree it's going to be Lamar Jackson.
100%.
I don't think there's much to debate there. Defensive Player of the Year is interesting. There's a lot of big names on here, including Deron Bland, who's a rookie, I'm pretty sure. And he broke some sort of record for pick sixes in a year in the NFL, if I remember right, from the Cowboys. I do think the winner of this award will be a Cowboy, but I think it'll be Micah Parsons.
I agree. You can't hate on Micah Parsons. He's just so good to watch. As much as we dislike the Cowboys.
Yeah, that's a very good football player. Offensive Player of the Year, I don't know how this differs much from MVP.
Neither do I.
I doubt they're going to give Lamar Jackson both awards.
Why are you even nominated for both those?
Yeah.
Because, logically, if you're the MVP, wouldn't that also make you the Offensive Player of the Year?
Right.
But it's the NFL. Nothing makes sense. Give me Christian McCaffrey.
Yep, I was going to say I'll take Christian McCaffrey too. Offensive Rookie of the Year, you got two Lions nominated for this award, but neither of them is going to win it. I think CJ Stroud is going to run away with that award for sure. But some big names there, Puka Nacua on there as well, Bijan Robinson. Defensive Rookie of the Year, not as many big names, and I'm honestly not familiar with how many of these guys played this year. I didn't hear much about any of these players.
Neither am I. That's why I have in the notes Pittsburgh cornerback, because I didn't know who Joey Porter Jr. was before I made the notes this week. Call me a casual. I don't care. But give me Devon Witherspoon from the Seahawks.
Okay. I'll take Will Anderson, but I have no idea how he played this year. I know he was a top 5 pick and went to the Texans. I'll say just because they went to the playoffs, he'll win it. You get two Texans winning. You get Stroud and Will Anderson.
What's funny, though, is I think Jalen Carter will probably win. I just wanted to say Devon Witherspoon to be different.
Okay.
Because I like corners. But
interesting. All right. Comeback Player of the Year.
This is probably the most interesting one on this list.
I know who they're going to give it to.
They better not give it to him, though.
They're going to give it to DeMar Hamlin.
Look at these names. You have Joe Flacco, who's like 41 and 42, comes out of retirement and takes the Browns to the postseason. You have Baker Mayfield, former first overall pick, who's been hopping teams, and he takes the Bucs to the postseason. Matthew Stafford comes back from a big injury. Tua comes back from a big injury, and then DeMar Hamlin, who can't properly execute a fake punt. That's probably the most memorable play he's done this year. Just so many players on this list who deserve it.
Yep, I totally agree.
But oh my gosh, I'll go with Joe Flacco. But we all know who it's going to be.
I tell you what, I think you're right. I think Joe Flacco should win it. Although Baker Mayfield and Matthew Stafford are two really good choices, but DeMar Hamlin's going to win it.
Anyone but DeMar Hamlin, I'm okay with.
I agree. I just think that because of the story, they're going to give it to him. Coach of the Year. Let's move this along a little quicker here. We got to get to the NBA. You got Dan Campbell, John Harbaugh, D'Amico Ryans, Kyle Shanahan, and Kevin Stefanski. Do we dare say Dan Campbell wins this?
I think he's definitely up there, but if I'm being honest, I wouldn't be mad with D'Amico Ryans or Kevin Stefanski. These are three teams who wildly outperform their expectations. So if any of them win, I'd be happy. But Dan Campbell logically should win this award, you think? Right? You take once 13-1 team to the NFC Championship.
Yeah.
So
he'd be a good choice. I wouldn't be upset if he won it, but if I was a voter, I'd vote for D'Amico Ryans. I think he did more with less with the Texans than Campbell did with a more talented Lions team.
That's fair.
And then we have assistant coach of the year. Ben Johnson, Mike McDonald, Todd Monken, Jim Schwartz, Bobby Slowick.
Weird to see Jim Schwartz.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to go with Mike McDonald.
Yeah, I agree.
Think. Even though I don't know if they factor in what happened in the playoffs, but even still, they only gave up 17 points to the Chiefs.
If you did factor everything into the playoffs, I feel like that would only strengthen McDonald's case.
Yeah.
But if you build and you help coach one of the best defenses in the league, I think you deserve that more so than offense.
Yeah.
Personally.
And now he's the only guy on that list who's going to be a head coach next year.
Right,
So
which is interesting.
He took the Seattle job. Very quickly, Kurt, has your Super Bowl pick changed since last week?
No. I'm locking in 49ers 30-27.
Okay. I'm staying with the Chiefs. I can't bet against Patrick Mahomes. I have to assume that he's going to make some sort of crazy play that'll help the Chiefs to victory. I'll go 34, Chiefs 34, Niners 28.
All right.
That's what I'm going with. Chiefs win by 6. All right, Kurt, stop me if you've heard this before, but the Pistons lost every game they played this week.
As per usual, right? I mean, I think last week I said that there was a winnable game this week, and it was the game against the Cavs. And I mentioned how the Cavs were pretty banged up with injuries, and of course, because I like to keep at least active on who's injured around the league. And I know Evan Mobley and Darius Garland have been injured like almost all year, I think. And I go to check the box score of the game, and they're both playing. So, not fun. We lost to the Cavaliers 128-121. I think, yeah, on the road. And then we lost to the Clippers at home 136-125. And then we lost to the Magic at home with some number alliteration 111-99. We are now 6-43, and we are still on pace for 10 wins.
I saw Franz Wagner put up 38 for the Magic in that game. But
the Michigan Magic.
I watched a little bit of that Clippers game, and the Pistons were up big, like in the first quarter. And by big, I'm talking like 14 or 16 points early.
Keyword first quarter.
Yep. And then, things unraveled. The Clippers flexed their muscle. You're not going to win a game against Kawhi Leonard and James Harden, Paul George, Russell Westbrook. It's not going to happen.
No.
But the Pistons are now 6-43. Like Kurt mentioned, they're on pace to win 10 games, which would put them one game better than the worst record in league history, I think.
3, I think.
3? Oh, because the Hornets went 7 and
whatever.
Something the lockout year.
Yeah, the lockout year.
Okay, so if we're looking at a full season, I think it may have been the 76ers went 9-73 one year. The Hornets or something. Let me look really quick.
While Brock is looking, we do have a very light injury report this week. Isaiah Stewart will miss around 10 days with an ankle sprain. Speaking of injury reports, Brock, I don't know if you've seen what the Grizzlies have been going through, but it's real bad over there. So, even though they've won more games than us, but
yeah, I noticed the Grizzlies, they got Ja Morant back after his suspension, and they had a rough start to the year because he was out, but I guess they haven't really turned it around.
I think Ja Morant is injured for the rest of the season.
Oh.
I know that I'm pretty sure like the best player that's not injured on that team right now is Luke Kennard, and that's not saying a lot. I know they have a bunch of players on 10-day contracts, and they've called up all their G Leaguers who are on 2-way contracts to play. Quite literally, all the starters are injured. So
that's tough. I brought up the numbers here. Let's break it down. Like you said, the Charlotte Bobcats of 2012 were 7-59. So that was obviously the fewest games won in a season, but they didn't play a full year. The Philadelphia 76ers in 1973 were 9-73. So the Pistons are 3 wins away from at least tying that. Then the 2016 Philadelphia 76ers were 10-72. So they were 1 game better. And then you have a few teams with 11-12, 13 wins. The Vancouver Grizzlies in 1999 were 8-42. I guess that was another lockout year. So that is interesting. But let's move into some Killian Hayes news. It appears he wants to be traded.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny to see all the hive mind Pistons fans. You know, they're real happy, and I understand why, because Killian Hayes is not really worthy of, you know, like a roster spot on a lot of teams, maybe even arguably our team. But Killian Hayes and his camp prefer to be traded ahead of the deadline, and the Pistons are in agreement. And we're going to see a Killian Hayes trade here in the next 3 days, which is interesting.
What are they going to get for him? A bag of peanuts and some chips or something?
If I had to guess, probably a salary filler. So basically a player who is worse than Killian Hayes, who has the same contract, at least money-wise, and maybe a second rounder or 2. But what scares me with Killian Hayes is a lot of the teams that are interested in him, so like the Grizzlies, I think the Spurs and the Raptors are also interested. These are a lot of teams who are not only historically good at drafting, but historically good at developing players, which kind of terrifies me that we will trade away Killian Hayes and he'll develop into what we thought he'd be on a different team. But it's too early to tell. We'll see where he ends up, because with the trade deadline, you never know. So much stuff is happening so fast that it's just super difficult to keep up with it. But we will update you guys on some trade deadline news, at least with the Pistons. So confirmed players that we will not be trading away: Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren, Isaiah Stewart, and Asor Thompson. I think that's a pretty perfect list of untouchables.
I'd agree.
Players I have that will probably not be traded are Marcus Sasser, Kevin Knox, Mike Muscala, and Joe Harris. I originally had Danilo Gallinari on here, but there's been recent news, I think, as of yesterday, that the Lakers are interested in Danilo Gallinari.
Really?
Yeah. And the Lakers will get who they want at... They'll just do anything they want to get the players that they want. And I think the players that are most likely to be traded, besides Danilo Gallinari, are Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, Killian Hayes, of course, and Monte Morris. So it's going to be a really interesting deadline. I didn't think this would be a deadline where we'd be selling, but I feel like the vibe is that we will be trying to sell.
Yeah, you've got to. When you're 6-43, you certainly can't be buying.
No.
Which according to some reports, it sounds like that they somewhat are. I mean, targeting Zach LaVine, I know he's out for the rest of the year due to injury, but what is that?
I don't know. Because the issue with trading for a guy like Zach LaVine or DeJounte Murray, who's another player we've been interested in, you have to give up at least one of the players on that list of untouchables. And quite frankly, like, it makes sense, right? If you want Zach LaVine, why would you not want to like trade Jaden Ivey for that? In terms of like, what are you going to do with Cade Cunningham, Zach LaVine, and Jaden Ivey on your roster? Someone's going to have to come off the bench. And it makes no sense because Jaden Ivey's been really good in the starting lineup lately. But as far as I can tell, we aren't going to be trading for a big name this offseason. Or not this offseason, but at this trade deadline.
They better not. I don't know. I just don't understand what would be the point of acquiring a Zach LaVine. Makes no sense. He's not going to play the rest of the year. If you give away Jaden Ivey and maybe one of the other players on your list of guys that are likely to be traded. Alec Burks, let's just pick for example. You give away Ivey, you give away Burks. You probably got to give up at least one pick.
And Bojan.
And Bojan, you think?
Yeah, because with the NBA, when you trade, you have to match the salary players are being paid unless the team has some cap space. And at this point in the year, nobody has cap space. So everyone's either at zero or negative money, mainly negative money, of course. So we'd have to match Zach LaVine's salary with players on our team and then give picks for a guy who is constantly injured and a liability on defense, which has been our problem all year. And yeah.
Yeah, so you give up a guy you just drafted 4th overall a few years ago. You give up Bojan, who is one of your better players, but it's clear he doesn't really fit with the direction of the franchise. You give up Burks, too, good role player, and then you give up picks for a guy who's going to come in. How many wins is Zach LaVine really going to get you next year? If you had, let's say they're on pace for 10. Let's say they finish with 10. You go 10-72. Adding Zach LaVine isn't going to get you anywhere near the playoffs.
It won't, but what scares me is at the end of Stan Van Gundy's run as the Pistons head coach and general manager, he was put into a position by Tom Gores where it's like, make a splash and start winning games or you're fired. So what does he logically do in that situation? He trades for Blake Griffin, which haunted our team for years. And I just hope that as much as we've been hating on Troy Weaver, I pray that Tom Gores doesn't put him in that position and we make a stupid trade for Zach LaVine or a guy like DeJounte Murray, because it would ruin everything. As much as I love DeJounte Murray, but I just hope we stay strictly sellers at this deadline.
I agree. And that deadline is in 2 days. There's still a lot of things that could happen in those 24 hours. I'm sure a guy like Adrian Wojnarowski is not getting a whole lot of sleep these next couple days. Let's get into the rest of the NBA. So, like we mentioned before the break, the trade deadline is in 2 days, and there hasn't been a whole lot of activity so far, which could mean you're going to see a lot of stuff happen in the next 48 hours. There are some big names that have been brought up as potential trade targets. Kurt, take us through. We already talked a little bit about Zach LaVine and DeJounte Murray. Who else we have on here?
So we have a good amount of people. This isn't like a full list of players I think will be traded. I think there's going to be more. But Zach LaVine and DeJounte Murray are certainly the prizes of this trade deadline, even though LaVine is injured for the rest of the season. So we have Alex Caruso. He's a guard from the Chicago Bulls. DeMar DeRozan. He's a forward, obviously, from the Chicago Bulls. Chris Paul, point guard from the Golden State Warriors. That's weird to say. We also have Andrew Wiggins. He's also on Golden State. Kyle Kuzma from the Washington Wolverines. Tyus Jones, also from the Washington Wolverines. Quentin Grimes from the New York Knicks. Bruce Brown on his new team, the Toronto Raptors. And Kevin Huerter from the Sacramento Kings. So, a lot of interesting stuff going on. There's a lot of more so role players on that list. And what is weird is I think a lot of teams want to try to trade a lot of their role players up into getting another star player. But I think there's so many teams trying to buy at this deadline, I don't really think that will happen, quite frankly.
Yeah, it's interesting. I see 3 Chicago Bulls on that list. I don't keep up a whole lot with the NBA standings, other than I know that the Pistons are always at the bottom, but the Bulls must be having not a great year if they're looking to get rid of their 2 best players.
Yeah.
And DeMar DeRozan and Zach LaVine. Obviously, we've mentioned, LaVine is done for the year, but willing to give up DeMar DeRozan and Alex Caruso along with LaVine, you're trading away your future.
Yeah, but I think a rebuild was long overdue for the Bulls because I thought last year at this time they were going to trade away all their players, and they still haven't. And they're just in a purgatory of they're not good to compete and they're not bad enough to, draft those top players. Not like there is any in this upcoming draft, but it's time to move on. But one thing that's good with the Bulls, I will say, Kobe White from UNC is finally emerging as a player. And I loved watching Kobe White back in his college days.
Yes, North Carolina. Whenever I hear Kobe White's name, I always remember the draft when he was drafted 2021.
I don't even remember.
A few years ago.
It's been so long. It might have been 2020 or 2019 at this rate.
And he had just gotten drafted in the first round to the Bulls. I think the Bulls drafted him.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there at the press conference, and a few picks after, Cam Johnson, his North Carolina teammate, gets picked. And he goes, Cam Johnson went, what?
Oh,
and the video kind of went viral. He goes, oh, that's so love, bro. And it was so funny. I always think of that video when I hear Kobe White's name. But we did get one trade already. We said there hasn't been a lot. This is really one of the only headliner trades, and I don't know if you could even call it that.
No, this is by far one of the worst trades I've ever seen. Not in terms of it was really bad for a team, but it's just, I don't know. It's a weird one. So, the Memphis Grizzlies traded away Steven Adams to the Houston Rockets. They traded just Steven Adams, and in return, they got back Victor Oladipo and 3 future second-round picks. What makes this trade so weird to me is Steven Adams and Victor Oladipo are done for the season, I'm pretty sure. Except maybe Steven Adams might have a chance to come back really late into the season. But it's... I don't know.
But for the Rockets aren't going to be a factor.
Probably not.
Late in the year, I don't think. So, yeah, that's strange. Victor Oladipo, man, he's been around.
Yeah.
I remember watching him in Indiana. He was great. And then he got drafted.
He was drafted by the Magic.
The Magic?
I can't recall the year, but I think he was picked either second or third. And, it might have been 2013.
Yeah, sounds right.
At this rate.
But he played with the Pacers too, I think.
Yeah. He was really good with the Pacers. I think he might have won Most Improved because he really just locked in. I remember seeing comparisons of how his body was before the offseason started and how it was after, because he went really crazy training with Dwayne Wade. And man, he turned into something, but then he just kept getting injured, and Victor Oladipo is kind of just a non-factor of a player now in the NBA, which is really disappointing. Yeah.
He was fun to watch at Indiana. Let's touch a little bit on this popular debate that has been going around. Can't be that popular because I haven't seen this, honestly, but lay this out for us really quick, Kurt.
All right, so big debate right now is who is the best high school basketball team of all time. Is it 2016 Chino Hills or 2020 Mount Verde? And that's Cade and them. So, let's break it down real quick. 2016 Chino Hills won a state championship and went undefeated. Their roster at the time comprised of the Ball brothers with Lonzo Ball, who was obviously picked second and is on the Chicago Bulls. LaMelo Ball, who was the Rookie of the Year in 2021 and is currently on the Charlotte Hornets. Eli Scott, he ended up playing college at Loyola Marymount, and he last played in Slovakia. At power forward, LiAngelo Ball, he went on to play at UCLA, and he's bounced around in the G League for a lot of teams, including the Pistons at one point. And then Onyeka Okongwu, he was the 6th overall pick years ago, and he's currently on the Atlanta Hawks waiting for Clint Capella to be traded. In 2020 Mount Verde, they went undefeated. I don't know if they competed for a state championship. I couldn't find anything on that. But at point guard, Cade Cunningham. Not much else to say there. We all know who Cade Cunningham is at this point. At shooting guard, Moses Moody. He was the 14th overall pick, and he's currently on Golden State. Small forward, name you might recognize, Brock, Caleb Houston.
Oh, yeah.
Number 32 overall pick, who went to the Michigan Magic a couple years back. Power forward, Scotty Barnes, the 2022 Rookie of the Year, and he's currently on the Toronto Raptors. And he was named as an All-Star earlier today, so that's great to see. And at center, Day'Ron Sharpe, 29th overall pick, who is currently on the Brooklyn Nets, and he's pretty underrated as a player. So, Brock, where do you lie in this debate?
I gotta say this is just strictly based off of the information you just laid out, because I never watched a game of either team. And maybe this is a little bit of recency bias, but I have to go with 2020 Montverde. I just think those are bigger names. And I think there's a little bit of turmoil, maybe, if that's the right word, amongst the three Ball brothers there with Chino Hills, and I know the dad's name.
Why am I
LeVar
yeah.
Ball. I know he's kind of controlling a little bit, it seems. So I think maybe a little bit of turmoil amongst the starters there and the brothers has them confused as 2020 Montverde rolls on. If they were hypothetically playing, I think 2020 Montverde wins that.
Kidding them.
How about you? Where do you lie in that debate?
I'm also going to go with 2020 Montverde, just because I remember watching a lot of Chino Hills basketball in 2016, and I think a lot of it was just feed the ball to the Ball brothers and do nothing else. I remember, I think LaMelo had 80 or 90 in a game, and if you just watch the tape, he's just cherry picking, not playing any defense. So it's I hope you score 90 points if you're a future NBA player in high school who's cherry picking. But we got to wrap up the show. So up next for the Pistons, we'll rapid fire this off. They play on the road at Sacramento against the Kings on Wednesday, February 7th. Loss for sure. Then they move up to Portland on Thursday, February 8th. Tickets are as low as $5. So if you're in Portland and you're looking for something to do, you can watch the Pistons win on Thursday. And they play against the Clippers on Saturday. Also on the road.
Another loss.
1 and 2. Book it.
You think 1 and 2?
1 and 2. Book it.
They could win that Trailblazers game, but it's the day after the game against the Kings, and then you got to travel north to Portland. They're probably tired. I say 0 and 3.
1 and 2. Book it.
Okay, I'll book it. We'll come back next week. The Pistons, according to Kurt, will be 7 and 45. We'll see you all next week.